These 7 demonic habits will shatter any dark chosen one's power. There is a truth that echoes through the deepest chambers of the soul, a truth that few dare to acknowledge. Even the most powerful among the dark chosen ones are not invincible. Power, no matter how ancient, how forbidden, or how immense, is never immune to decay. And often the decay doesn't come from outside forces or visible adversaries, it comes from within. It is the unseen, the tolerated, the normalized habits that begin to erode the foundation of power like termites in a temple. You who walk the edge between shadow and self-mastery must know this. There are 7 demonic habits that will shatter any dark chosen one's power. Not just weaken it, shatter it. And it starts always with the invisible rot. I want you to imagine something. Picture a being of immense spiritual presence, someone who has danced with the abyss, someone who has tasted the raw nectar of cosmic knowledge, someone feared and revered. Now picture that same being, years later, crumbling, forgotten, their name whispered only as a cautionary tale. What happened? What could reduce a spiritual titan to ash? It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a battle. It was themselves.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first demonic habit is spiritual arrogance. It is the belief that you are beyond growth, beyond learning, beyond flaw. This is the most seductive poison. The moment you begin thinking I have arrived is the moment you begin to rot. True power flows in humility. Not the humility of weakness, but the humility of knowing that you are a vessel for something greater. Arrogance blinds you to the subtle shifts in your own energy. It deafens you to the whispers of the divine and the warnings of your higher self. And once you stop hearing, you start falling. The scariest part, you won't notice until it's too late. Have you ever met someone who was once powerful, once enlightened, once feared, and now they are a shell? Ask yourself, did they fall because they lost their power or because they believed they couldn't? This is the paradox of the dark chosen. The deeper your knowledge, the more dangerous your ego becomes. Now, the second demonic habit is addiction to chaos. Many who walk the path of shadows confuse chaos with power. They believe destruction is proof of dominion. They seek to disrupt, to dismantle, to control through fear. But chaos is a hungry entity. It does not serve, it consumes. When you become addicted to chaos, you are no longer its master. You are its slave. And it's subtle. You start by manipulating, then instigating, then destroying. Eventually, you cannot sit in silence. You cannot rest in peace. You need the noise, the war, the drama. And that need becomes your cage. You might be asking, but isn't disruption necessary for transformation? Yes, but addiction to it is not. There's a difference between wielding fire and being burned by it. Can you sit alone in stillness without needing to provoke reality to feel alive? Or has chaos become your only pulse? The third demonic habit is one of the most insidious, neglecting the inner temple. We often think of power as an outward force, our rituals, our spells, our influence over others. But the true seat of power is within your inner temple, your thoughts, your emotions, your breath. When the inner temple is neglected, your outer manifestations become hollow. You might still perform the rites, still receive visions, still command attention, but the core is empty. And eventually the outer world reflects that inner decay. I'll ask you something very serious. When was the last time you truly cleaned your inner temple? Not just meditated but purified? Not just thought but felt deeply? Not just planned your next spiritual conquest, but wept in surrender to your own shadow? The inner temple must be tended like sacred ground. You cannot skip this, you cannot fake this. Your inner temple is where your true power is born and where it will die if you ignore it. Now, let's talk about the fourth demonic habit, isolated supremacy. This is the belief that you do not need others. that no one else is worthy of your energy, your time, your connection. This is a lie the shadow tells to preserve its dominance. But even the most powerful beings in history, whether of light or dark, had allies, councils, mirrors. Isolation breeds delusion. It creates an echo chamber where your ego becomes your god. You stop being challenged, you stop evolving, and you start decaying. Connection is not weakness. It is a refining fire. It forces you to see yourself through others. It humbles you. It reminds you that no matter how far you've come, there is always more to learn, always more to give. You might be powerful alone, but you are unstoppable in conscious unity. The dark chosen one who cuts off all connection to preserve their supremacy is already falling, they just don't see it yet. Now, I want you to pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself this question: which of these habits is already breathing in the corners of your life? Which one have you justified? Which one have you ignored? Because awareness is the first key. You cannot destroy what you will not name. Let's move to the fifth habit, emotional suppression. This one is deadly. Many powerful beings believe emotions are distractions, that feeling is weakness. So they suppress, numb, bury. But emotions are not weakness. Emotions are portals. When you suppress your grief, your rage, your joy, you suppress your access to raw energy. The darkness you command becomes mechanical. Your intuition dulls. Your manifestations become erratic or ineffective. Why? Because your emotions are your access to the full spectrum of spiritual force. When was the last time you allowed yourself to fully feel? Not analyze, not control, not explain, just feel. We are energy beings, and energy flows through emotion. By denying them, you are cutting off your own power supply. You are walking with half a soul. The sixth habit is more subtle, but equally destructive: disrespecting the body. This vessel you have, this flesh and bone, this is not separate from your spiritual work. It is not a prison. It is a sacred technology. When you ignore its needs, poison it with substances, deprive it of rest, or treat it with disdain, you degrade your spiritual signal. Your body is the altar. If the altar is neglected, the ritual loses power. If the temple is crumbling, the divine cannot anchor. Are you listening to your body, or are you using it like a disposable tool in pursuit of power? You cannot sustain high-frequency energy in a low-frequency vessel. The body must be brought into alignment. It must be honored. To disrespect it is to sabotage your own ascension. And finally, the seventh demonic habit, the most dangerous of them all: forgetting the origin. This happens when you become so focused on the rituals, the power, the image, the external world, that you forget why you began. You forget the pain that sparked your awakening. You forget the hunger that led you to the edge of madness. You forget the innocence that once whispered to the stars. And without that origin, without that sacred remembering, you become hollow, a puppet of performance, a being of power without purpose. Power without purpose is a curse. So I ask you, do you remember your origin? Do you remember the moment that cracked you open? Or have you buried it under layers of identity, performance, and ambition? These 7 habits are not just bad behaviors. They are spiritual viruses. They do not attack quickly. They corrode slowly. And by the time you feel the damage, it may already be too late. But there is hope. Always. Power can be restored. The path can be realigned. But first we must confront the truth, not just in theory, in practice. And that is where we go next. Reforging the soul, how to reclaim power after spiritual collapse. There comes a moment in every dark chosen one's journey when something breaks. It might be a sudden fall from grace, or it might be a slow, agonizing unraveling. But whether it's a dramatic collapse or a quiet decay, the experience is the same. Your power feels lost, your clarity is clouded, your spirit is fractured. The rituals stop working. The visions fade. The confidence turns into confusion. And you begin to question everything you once believed about yourself. This is not failure. This is the forge. The sacred crucible where true power is reforged not in dominance but in surrender. The collapse is not your enemy. It is your mirror. It shows you exactly where you built on illusion, where you compromised your essence, where you chased shadows and called it glory. And in that space, raw, exposed, humiliated, you are given a rare opportunity to start again, but this time from truth. Reclaiming your power begins with radical honesty, not the kind of honesty that sounds poetic in a journal or impressive in conversation. I'm talking about gut-wrenching, ego-shattering, I lied to myself honesty. You must be willing to look at what you pretended not to see. The habits you rationalized, the people you manipulated, the parts of yourself you abandoned to appear powerful, the moments you knew better but chose lesser. This is not about guilt. This is about accountability, because nothing real can be built on denial. Have you ever sat with yourself in silence, not to meditate, not to manifest, but just to listen? Listen to the parts you avoid, the memories you numb, the truths you buried under performance. That is where the reclamation begins. You cannot reclaim what you will not face. And spiritual collapse is the universe's way of forcing you to finally face it. As you begin to pick up the pieces, you must understand one sacred law: you cannot rebuild on the same foundation that broke you. Something must be let go. A belief, a persona, a relationship, a dream, sometimes even a name. The ego will resist. It will tell you that you're losing power. But in truth, you're shedding what was never yours to keep. Real power does not cling. It flows. And when it feels like everything is falling apart, it's often because something far more aligned is trying to break through. But it can't live in the same space as your illusions. So I ask you, with all the weight of this moment, what are you still holding onto that is already dead? What identity, what loyalty, what habit, what mask are you clinging to even though it's suffocating your soul? The hardest part of reforging is allowing yourself to be empty. We fear emptiness because we associate it with weakness. But spiritual emptiness is not the absence of self, it is the clearing of false selves. It is the sacred void where your true essence can finally return. Sit in that void. Let it undo you. Let it strip the noise. Let it burn away everything that was borrowed. And when the silence becomes unbearable, stay. Because just beyond that silence is a voice. Not external, not mystical, but yours, the one you forgot. When that voice returns, even faintly, follow it. It will feel unfamiliar at first, fragile, but it holds the blueprint of your real power, not the performative power, but the essence power. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't fear collapse. The kind that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. And from there, rebuild, slowly, intentionally. Align every action with that voice. Reclaim your inner temple with devotion. Reconnect with others not to dominate, but to reflect. Feel your emotions not as burdens, but as guides. Treat your body as sacred, not as a tool. And never forget your origin again. Collapse is not the end. It is the invitation. The sacred mirror, how relationships reveal hidden weakness in the spirit. There is no path to true power that does not pass through the mirror of another soul. We like to believe that our spiritual journey is a solitary one that we can ascend alone, perfect ourselves in silence, and rise above the noise of the world through sheer will. But the truth is far more humbling. Relationships are not distractions from your spiritual path, they are the path. They are the sacred mirrors that reveal the parts of you no ritual, mantra, or meditation ever will. You can chant for hours. You can master the elements, speak to spirits, command energy with your hands. But until you've looked into the eyes of someone who challenges your wounds, your patterns, your ego, you haven't truly seen yourself. That's the terrifying beauty of connection. It strips away the illusion. You might believe you're powerful, balanced, wise, but the moment you're triggered in a relationship, the truth reveals itself. Suddenly, the spiritual master becomes the inner child. The dark chosen becomes defensive, reactive, exposed. And that is where the real work begins. Ask yourself this: who in your life do you avoid because they show you a part of yourself you haven't healed? Who do you demonize because they won't bow to your spiritual authority? Who have you cut off, not because they were toxic, but because they reflected a truth you weren't ready to face? You see, power that cannot withstand relationship is not power, it is performance. The ego loves isolation because it can stay unchallenged there. But the soul grows in contact. Every argument is a classroom. Every betrayal, a lesson. Every heartbreak, a cracking open of the false self. You can't fake it in relationships. You either show up whole or you get exposed. And sometimes being exposed is exactly what you need. But we resist this. We categorize people. They're low frequency. They're not on my level. They're karmic, not divine. These labels are often just shields, convenient ways to avoid the discomfort of reflection. But what if the people you label as distractions are actually assignments? What if their very presence is the universe's way of saying, look here, this wound still breathes? Don't misunderstand, this isn't about tolerating abuse or staying in misaligned bonds. It's about using every relationship, even the painful ones, as data, as keys, as catalysts. The question is not, are they right for me? The deeper question is, what are they revealing about me? And that leads us to the most hidden weakness of all, spiritual bypassing through superiority. The belief that because you're awakened, you're above human messiness. That you don't need to explain, apologize, listen, or grow. That others should simply align or be dismissed. This is not power. This is avoidance draped in robes of enlightenment. True power is humble enough to say, I was wrong. Strong enough to admit, I'm still learning. Brave enough to ask, can you help me see what I can't? Relationships, especially the difficult ones, are the grindstone on which your spirit is sharpened. They are the fire that tempers your will. They are the sacred chaos that refines your clarity. So the next time you feel resistance towards someone, pause. Don't rush to cut them off. Ask, what part of me feels threatened? What story am I telling myself about them? What wound are they pressing that I haven't healed? Because behind that discomfort is your next level. Behind that mirror is your next breakthrough. And when you begin to see relationships this way, not as accidents or annoyances, but as sacred mirrors, you stop running. You start listening. You start growing. And your power is no longer fragile. It becomes grounded, integrated, real. The final threshold, how to transcend the 7 habits and awaken unbreakable power. There comes a point in every sovereign journey where the illusions have burned away, the ego has been humbled, and the spirit stands alone at the threshold not of power, but of truth. This is the final threshold. Beyond it lies a power that is not performative, not borrowed, not fragile. It is unbreakable, not because it cannot be touched, but because it has already been broken, reforged, and made whole. If you've come this far through collapse, through reflection, through the mirror of others, you are ready. But there is one more step, transcendence. To transcend these 7 demonic habits, you do not fight them, you outgrow them. You make them obsolete by becoming someone who no longer needs them. That is the essence of spiritual maturity, not suppressing your shadows, but no longer being seduced by them. You become too rooted in truth to lie, too anchored in peace to seek chaos, too aligned with your essence to perform. The habits fall away not because you forced them out, but because you transformed into someone they cannot cling to. But how do we do that? First, we return to presence. Not the kind of presence that floats in meditation, but the fierce presence that meets life as it is. Every moment becomes a ceremony. Every breath, a choice. You become so aware of yourself, your thoughts, your reactions, your energy, that old habits can no longer sneak in unnoticed. And when they do appear, you witness them without judgment. You say, "Ah, there you are." And with awareness, they dissolve. Second, you cultivate devotion. Not to a deity or dogma, but to your own becoming. You rise each day with reverence, not just for the light within you, but for the shadow too. You stop chasing highs and start honoring the lows. Devotion means showing up for your spirit even when no one is watching. It means tending your inner temple even when there's no reward. You become loyal to your soul, not your image, not your followers, not your ego. Your soul. Third, you choose alignment over ambition. The dark chosen ones who fall are often the most ambitious. But ambition without alignment is a trap. It leads you away from your essence and toward empty victories. Alignment means choosing what feels right, even if it doesn't look impressive. It means saying no to the wrong opportunities, the fake alliances, the ego-driven paths. When you live in alignment, your power becomes quiet but undeniable. It no longer needs to shout. It simply is. Fourth, you practice ruthless compassion. For yourself first, because you will still stumble. The habits may return. The ego may whisper, but compassion turns those moments into wisdom instead of shame. When you love yourself through your humanness, you become unbreakable. Not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. And from that wholeness you extend compassion to others, not as weakness, but as power. Compassion that says, "I see your pain. I will not carry it, but I will not attack it either." That is mastery. Fifth, you become a guardian of your energy. You no longer open your gates to everyone. You no longer explain your light to those committed to misunderstanding. You discern. You protect. You preserve. Not from fear, but from sacred responsibility. Your energy is a temple, and only those who come with reverence may enter. That is not arrogance. That is sovereignty. So now I ask you, are you ready to stop chasing power and become the vessel through which power flows? Are you ready to no longer be ruled by the 7 habits, but to rise as the one who mastered them? Are you ready to cross the final threshold, not into more doing, but into deeper being? Because that is where the unbreakable power lives, in the stillness, in the silence, in the surrendered presence of one who remembers who they are without needing the world to. You are not here to conquer. You are here to embody. You are not here to dominate. You are here to illuminate. And the darkness within you, once tamed, becomes a throne, not a prison. You do not need to prove your power. You are the power. The 7 demonic habits. Let them fall. Let them rot. Let them return to the void they came from. You were always meant to rise beyond them. And now you can.